Hey, happy Wednesday. This is September 17th. Wow. My name's Casey. This is the 3:30 mindfulness meditation half hour on Wednesday. Good to see you. Really violent week, exceptionally so, uh, even by the standards of the American news cycle. Very, very violent week. Political violence, random violence, war, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to bring up any specifics because if I bring up one case or one instance, there's about 50 others that would follow, and we just take up the entire half hour. So, um, but to zoom out a little bit and to put this in perspective, this being the situation that we find ourselves in as Americans, um, I think that when it comes to social media and the interconnectivity of the internet in general, I feel like we as a civilization or a species, the human species, I feel like we are all partaking in the greatest social experiment that has ever come upon mankind. And the idea that we just are completely connected to endless amounts of information, accurate or not, but just the complete access to trillions and trillions of videos and influences and algorithmic um, persuasions that just bring us right where we want to be. And echo chambers and the vitriol. And um, there's there's so much about social media that very much mimics how the mind works. And the mind can be very chaotic at times, to be sure. There's a lot of beautiful things about our mind, but if the mind goes unchecked, um, it can certainly turn against itself as well. And we're dealing with the 21st century um, phenomenon, right? None of the previous centuries give us any sort of framework with which to control or to sort of regulate the internet. Obviously, we're trying to make up rules as we go along, but nobody really knows the long-term effects of the power that we have with social media, the internet. Nobody knows the long-term effects because there's just not enough time. There's not enough data, and so it is the greatest social experiment, I think, in the history of mankind. And the data that is coming through, a lot of it does not look very promising. The issues of mental health and the toll that the constant connectivity is taking on the youth in particular. I come from an interesting generation. I was born without the internet and grew up, and the internet was introduced. And so I know what it's like without it. But my youngest sister, for instance, she was born in 2001. She doesn't know what it's like to live without Google. Google is a ubiquitous entity and probably will be for a while, short of like a nuclear apocalypse. All of this is to say that we are partaking in this social experiment, and we need to be very careful with where we put our energy, where we put our focus, where we put our time, what we do with ourselves. And to be able to disconnect, because I have social media, and this isn't like an anti-social media message or anything like that. I have a social media presence. I mean, I'm an artist, a musical artist. At one point, I was very consistent with posting, and I hate it personally. It's not good for my mental health. I understand that people do it and they really like it. They like to create content. They like to you know keep in touch with friends and things like that. I kind of watch from the sidelines, but it certainly seems like the world is on fire. Now, was the violence always there? We're just so connected that we see it all the time, and it's just all pervasive because we have access to that information, those videos, that news. I don't know, maybe. But to be able to disconnect and to recognize that social media in general is a simulation of how our mind operates. Our mind fires through neural pathways, and neurons that fire together, wire together, is a um, neuroscientific saying. The neurons that fire together, wire together. So our brain is making patterns, and it picks out patterns all the time. And in many ways, Facebook and Instagram, it is playing right into the habitual addictive nature that the mind certainly is capable of going overboard with. So to be able to step back and perhaps not just jump online and say, the most emotional thing that you're thinking right now. Self-control is a virtue, especially when we have something as wild and unchecked as the internet and social media. To be able to step back and go analog, which is to say, putting the phone down, stepping away even from the news. That's not to say that it's not there, but it will always be there when you get back. To even take 20 minutes of your day and think, okay, I'm going inward now. All of this outward stimulation. Again, there's nothing that I personally have against social media, but we need to be careful. And I've felt throughout the week, there's just this like really heavy feeling of violence and just like, wow, the world is on fire. And my first instinct with that, because of my meditation practice, is, well, let me take a moment, step back, and come back to myself. And I had a great therapist for years, and he said that the role of therapy, the purpose of therapy, is to be able to self-parent, is to give yourself what your parents could not. And whether you had the most well-adjusted, healthy, balanced childhood, or you dealt with extensive trauma throughout your childhood, there's always something there. I mean, nobody comes out of childhood unscathed, right? A friend moves away, the dog gets hit by a car, whatever. Trauma is trauma, and we're left to deal with that in ways that hopefully serve us, but oftentimes not. To self-parent, to come back to yourself. It occurred to me just earlier today how the majority of my life I had not felt safe. And that started when I was young, going through childhood. The car crash that many of you are familiar with when I was 24, that almost killed me. The aftermath of that was catastrophic, not just on a physical level, but an emotional and psychological level. I was totally decimated by that. And it was only in the last 10 years or so where I thought, okay, how can I feel safe? How can I, because outside vices could make me feel safe to a certain extent, but that's artificial. That is external, right? And so how can I make myself feel safe? Which was an unfamiliar feeling for me. I had to figure that out. And I had to self-parent. I had to think, okay, well, what did I not get when I was younger? What am I missing? What do I feel like I'm lacking? The inner child work that is so important to do. The visualization there can be very, very powerful. What does that kid need? The part of me that never felt safe. How do I make that part feel safe? And sitting down and coming back to my breath, coming back to the present moment, coming back to myself, is really what laid the groundwork, the foundation for starting to feel safe. And the neurons that fire together, wire together. If we continue to invest in a pattern, a conditioned behavior pattern, where we are coming back to our breath, coming back to the present moment, down regulating the nervous system, activating the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the yin to the yang of the autonomic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is when we breathe in, parasympathetic is when we breathe out. And obviously we need both, but if we're running in the red at all times, we're never going to feel safe. And it doesn't matter, if you felt safe in your childhood, it doesn't matter. I mean, there's always something to deal with. The severity may vary, but to be able to give yourself what you need, an inside out approach, is so important, especially when everything externally is so wild, so unchecked, so violent, so out of control. And of course, in many ways, the outside is a reflection of what's happening on the inside, but all the more reason to go inside and make yourself feel safe, to find that safe space, even for 20 minutes twice a day, because it matters and it makes a big difference. To invest in that practice, I think, is the most important thing that you can do. To approach everything from a volatile and emotional standpoint will keep you in the red, running in the red in terms of anxiety or stress or feeling not safe. We have the opportunity every time we sit down to meditate, to come back to ourselves, to self-parent, to give ourselves what we may not have had access to early on in life. And that's what we do when we sit down to meditate. And I find myself doing that. And the Buddha said to his followers, his disciples, his friends on his deathbed, the disciples said, what are we going to do without you? You're going to die. I mean, you're the best teacher we ever had. What's going to happen when you're gone? The Buddha said, be a light unto yourself. There is no other light. And be a refuge unto yourself. There is no other refuge. And I like that. Be a refuge unto yourself. There is no other refuge. There are certain external ideas or things that we can take refuge in, but they are external. Can we turn that inward? Can we find it regardless of external circumstances? Because if we can sit down in the midst of all the chaos and the violence and everything that's going on and find that peace within ourselves, find that safety within ourselves, then we start to transform the outside just by doing the inside work. That's the investment that we're making. And again, trauma is trauma, and we all have some form of that. And some of us have worked through it and, are moving forward. Others may not even know that it's unresolved. But when we sit down to meditate, it is a courageous effort, I think, to sit down and allow everything to come and go, to just let yourself feel however you're feeling. Notice what you're thinking. Meditation is not about stopping your thoughts. Meditation is about watching your thoughts, noticing patterns, noticing what comes up, and noticing the ever-changing nature of all phenomena, all existence. And we can tap into that ever-changing aspect and take refuge in that, knowing that everything is going to change, and being there for that experience. And I say it's very courageous to sit down and just be with yourself, just to stop, to look deeply. That takes a lot of courage. And I say that not to glorify my own practice or anything, but I do speak from experience, because the scariest thing I've ever done to this day is sit down and think, okay, let's just see what comes up, right? Let's see what creatures come out of the deep, right? Scary stuff, high risk, high reward. But that's the scariest thing I've ever done, was to sit down and think, okay, whatever comes up, if it's trauma from my past, if it's memories of childhood, if it's, let's just see what comes up. Let's be open to it. Being open and returning to yourself and calming yourself down, finding that safety, finding that foundation, finding that balance, finding that grounding sense of self, sense of safety, is the work that we do when we meditate. And sometimes it may feel like there's a void. And in that void, it's like, well, there's no way I'll be able to feel safe there. That's too much. That's too much trauma. That's too much darkness. That's too much whatever. Sit with that, because that is where the work happens. And if you relax enough, if you stay vigilant in your practice and practice compassion, which I don't think anyone would argue that more compassion would really help our situation right now. Compassion starts with self. And if we can give ourselves what we really need in terms of feeling safe, that will reflect to the world around us. So when you look at the news, when you watch TV, when you look at your phone, be aware that that is a social experiment, that we don't know the consequences and the repercussions of just yet, and be mindful of that. Um, Doom scrolling is a term. You scroll for hours and think that news story is horrible. That's a terrible video. This is all nightmarish. You're doom scrolling. Um, that has a place, sure. I mean, staying informed is one thing, but too much of anything can be detrimental to one's health, and we need to keep that in mind. So, the more we invest in finding that stillness, that safe space that we give ourselves, that's the most important work that you can do. So let's find 10 minutes and explore that space and find that stillness. And we do it for ourselves, and then it can expand from there. Find a comfortable seated position, take a few deep breaths, start to notice your heart rate as it slows down, as you deepen with the exhales. You can feel that stillness settle in your limbs, your arms and your legs, your fingers and your toes. Take a few deep breaths. Before you gently come out, take a moment and acknowledge that this practice, this space, is here for you. It's the whole purpose of the practice. When you're ready, gently blink your eyes open. The Zen Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh talks about what he would do if he was on a plane and the plane started to go down. He says, if I was on a plane and the plane started to go down, I would connect with my breath. And he's not just talking about connecting with his breath, he's talking about the practice of finding that grounding, mindful sense of safety that we can only give ourselves. We can't find it externally. Sometimes it may feel like the whole world is on a collision course, like we're on a plane that's going down. And maybe we are, but regardless, what better time to connect with yourself? What better time to invest in healing your wounds, shining the light of mindfulness in areas that at one point you were too scared to even acknowledge? That's the work that we do, and it is so important. So thank you for showing up, for sharing your practice to me. Let me share my practice with you. We'll see you soon. Take care out there.